If you don't own Bitcoin, you are never going to be financially free. It doesn't matter how much work you do, how much value you create, how many problems you solve, how much money you make. It does not matter because if you don't own Bitcoin, you own other assets that require a bunch of work in order to own them. And in this video, I want to go into this in depth. Let's get started. So, like I said, if you don't own Bitcoin, you're never going to be financially free because you're always going to have a job. Let's say, for example, you buy stocks. You have to constantly pay attention to what the company is doing and how the company is going to perform in the future. You have to pay attention to their guidance. You have to pay attention to their earnings. There's tons of things you have to pay attention to make sure that you keep making money and you keep up with inflation. If you buy index funds, you have to constantly think about what's going to happen with the Fed. What are interest rates going to do? What are the metrics that are increasing GDP or decreasing GDP and how are they performing? You have to constantly be paying attention to that because no matter what happens, small changes can lead to massive differences in the value and the price of stocks. And this could mean that you could lose a significant amount of money just from holding the wrong stock at the wrong time. If you own real estate, you're always going to have a job as well because you have to constantly deal with tenants, you have to constantly deal with realtors, you have to deal with lawyers, you have to deal with property taxes, you have to deal with maintenance and repairs. All of that is very hard work and it takes up a lot of your time. So why not just buy something that you buy and hold? And you have to do nothing to maintain it. All you have to do is make sure that your security is intact and you have to keep that asset for as long as possible. That's literally it. All you have to do is deal with the volatility that comes with owning that asset. That asset, of course, is Bitcoin. I think the best way to become financially free is to start a business and transfer that value that you create into Bitcoin because with a business, you have more control over your income, you have more control over where you're working from, you have more control over your time, and you have more control over everything that you do to grow that business and to make sure that that business survives and continues to work the way that you need it to. Starting a business or buying Bitcoin definitely aren't get rich quick schemes, but they'll get you rich faster than all of the other assets that you have available to you. So with the stock market, maybe you'll get like a 12% return. With real estate, maybe you'll get a 15% return. I think Bitcoin's returns are going to accelerate over time and you're going to get higher and higher returns if you hold Bitcoin for longer and longer. The greatest thing about having Bitcoin and a business is that both of them use compounding to their advantage. And over time, you're going to be able to put more and more value into Bitcoin so that you're storing more of the best asset in the world. Your goal here should be to focus on what you can control. And what you can control is creating value for others and putting as much of that value into Bitcoin as possible. It doesn't matter if you discover Bitcoin at the right time or if you're really, really early. If you don't have a lot of Bitcoin, then that Bitcoin is probably not going to do much for you. So you have to create value that you can put into Bitcoin, and eventually that Bitcoin will start working on your behalf. To really put this into perspective, look at this from the point of view of somebody who has $1 to put into Bitcoin versus somebody who has $5 million to put into a savings account that they're only getting 1% from. So on this spreadsheet here, you see that the person who has $1 is in column A. They buy Bitcoin, and let's say Bitcoin grows at 35% per year. It's going to take them 8 years to get to $11, from $1 to $11. And that's a really great return. That's 1,000%. But they went from $1 to $11. On the other hand, somebody who has $5 million, if they put their money into a bank account where they're earning 1%, in that first year, they're earning 50 grand. $50,000. You aren't going to earn $50,000 with Bitcoin for a very, very long time if you only have $1 to put into it. So you can see here, it's going to take you something like 36 years to get to $50,000 to begin with. On the other hand, this person who has $5 million, they put their money into a bank account, they do literally nothing. They have 50,000 extra dollars, and their purchasing power may not have increased in reality, but they earned a lot more by making that decision to put $5 million into a 1% savings account than you did from taking the risk of putting $1 into Bitcoin, where you get a 35% return versus this person in column B getting a 1% return. So your goal should be to increase the amount of money that you put into Bitcoin. It doesn't matter how much knowledge you have of Bitcoin. It doesn't matter how deeply you understand it. If you don't have any capital to put into it, then you're probably not going to become rich because the Bitcoin that you have isn't enough to make you rich. And this is why I like to say, don't wait for the market to help you retire. Help yourself retire. Create as much value as you can so that you can increase the amount that you put into Bitcoin. So let's say if you start a business or you spend a little bit less on your day-to-day life and you're able to save an extra $50 to $100, of course, you're going to see this number grow and grow and grow until at some point you surpass that $5 million holder, because the asset that they have isn't growing at all. It'll take you a little bit of time to get to that point. You can see here at year 38, you have $8.9 million if you start with $100 and your Bitcoin keeps growing at 35%. But this person who has $5 million today has $7.2 million because their savings didn't grow as quickly as your Bitcoin did. A lot of people think that Bitcoin is going to make them rich and they don't have that much money. And their question is, I don't have that much money. How much Bitcoin do I need to retire? Don't think of it that way. Think of it as, I don't have much money. How do I make more money so that I can buy more Bitcoin? And I can make sure that at some point I will be able to retire. Because if you have to wait 35, 40, 50 years with your $100 worth of Bitcoin to eventually retire, then what's the point? So, like I said, do whatever you can to create more value for other people. That's the only way to get rich quick, because other people will be willing to pay you for the value you create for them if you change their life. If you create something of value and they find it so valuable that they'll pay you for it, then you're going to do very well. And you need to make sure that you can constantly create that thing. You can keep creating that thing over and over again, because that's the way to build wealth. That's the way to increase your net worth, by creating more value, selling that value into the market, and then getting a return from it. Whether you have $1 of Bitcoin or $5 million worth of Bitcoin, the percentage return will be exactly the same. The first step is making sure that you're familiar with Bitcoin and you understand it so that you can actually buy it at some point. And then the second step is to create the value you can to transfer that value into Bitcoin. A lot of people who already have value are moving their value into Bitcoin, and they're at an advantage because they already have the value. They've already created the value and they've put it into other assets. Now they can sell those other assets and they can buy Bitcoin with it. So no matter what happens in the economy, your best asset is your ability to earn. If you can't earn money, it doesn't matter what your knowledge is like. It doesn't matter what you know about Bitcoin. You're not going to get rich, because if you only have $1, then how are you going to survive? How are you going to live your day-to-day life? This is a problem that a lot of people are dealing with. And because they have this problem, they start using leverage and then they lose all of their money because they borrow money to make massive gambles on things that they don't quite understand. So again, get as much Bitcoin as you can. But to do that, you have to be able to create value. You have to be able to trade value for value, give other people value so they're willing to give you their value, and then you can exchange that value that you receive for Bitcoin. If you don't own Bitcoin, you're always going to have a second job. You're always going to have a part-time job, whether you're paying attention to markets, whether you're paying attention to your rental property, whether you're dealing with your interest rates on your bonds, or you have to deal with your bank because they're holding on to your gold. You have to pay attention to way too many things with every other asset, and you will never become financially free, because your financial freedom relies on these assets working the way that they're supposed to. If the people who are running the company that you own aren't making the right decisions, then you're going to lose all of your money. If your rental property can't produce positive cash flows, then you're not going to make money. Your tenants could destroy the property, and again, you're not going to make money. If the US government borrows way more dollars and they keep dumping bonds into the market, again, you're not going to make money. To truly become financially free, create value. Let's say start a business or do a 9 to 5 where you're getting paid appropriately, and then put that value into Bitcoin. At some point, you're going to see that you've created so much value and you've converted so much of it into Bitcoin that you're never going to have to think about money again. If you found value in the video that you just watched, you should watch this one here where I explain how I'm going to retire 20 or more years sooner than 95% of millennials because of Bitcoin.